Let me start off by saying this. I wasn't really that excited for this movie. I knew it existed, but I didn't watch any of the trailers, and honestly, I just simply didn't care that much. But then I changed my mind after learning about the circumstances surrounding it. This is one of those movies where people are kind of divided on it. Well, actually, no, not really divided on it. It's just that everybody has a differing opinion on it. Some really love it, some don't, others just think it's okay. So I went to see it to get my own viewpoint on it. But I also had another reason. I found out why I wasn't so hyped for it, and it was because that Disney wasn't doing a whole lot to promote this movie. There are trailers and clips for this movie up on the internet, but Disney has not been doing that much to promote this movie or make it publicly known. And on top of that, when this movie did come out, they charged premiere access for it on Disney Plus and released it on the same day as WandaVision. That's really odd since this is supposed to be Disney's next big animated movie. So because of all of that, I changed my mind at the last second, went to see it, and had a surprisingly good time with it, despite the numerous flaws it has. So let's get into it. Let me start off with the first thing about this movie that I actually liked. The story is actually really good. It's set in the fantasy world of Kumandra, where the five kingdoms are divided, and there are these purple smog monsters floating about who turn people into statues by touching them. The main character, Raya, has been traveling around the world for 6 years looking for the last dragon, Sisu. Sisu has the power to restore a magical glowing orb that can drive the Dune away and restore the world. She finds her, and then the two of them set out on an adventure to collect all 6 pieces of the orb so that Sisu can use her power to put them back together. It's a pretty simple setup, but what backs it up is the excellent world building. The movie takes its time setting up the world, introducing it to you, and telling you what's going on in it. All 5 kingdoms get characterized, and as many people have pointed out, it's also clever how all of the kingdoms are named after different body parts of a dragon. The opening for this movie is actually about 20 minutes long, but I actually didn't mind it because the pacing was so good. While I was watching it, it actually reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I mean that in a good way. But then, once it gets to the main story, the pacing becomes very inconsistent. And what I mean by that is that the story structure feels very episodic. After Raya meets Sisu, the rest of the movie is them visiting the 5 kingdoms so they can collect the jewel shards. And then they recruit a new party member just before they leave, kind of like a TV show. It's kind of rushed. They never stay in the same place for long enough for it to be satisfying. So while the story is definitely good, it's the delivery of it that comes off as a little bit shaky. There's also other problems. As a lot of people have pointed out, the movie does kinda go into a little too much exposition about everything. Like, not even just in the opening, but also bits in the middle too. The side characters are good, but their motivations get summed up in a single scene where they explain what their backstory is, and then the movie just kinda forgets about them. You see what I mean here? For every good idea, the movie makes one small bad mistake that prevents the idea from reaching its full potential. It makes me wish this was a TV show, so that it had more time to flesh out its story elements and characters. In fact, the more I think about it, the more it makes me wonder if this was going to be a TV show, but then I guess it got changed at the last second to a movie and they just had to go with what they got. Nothing about this movie is bad, it's just that it could have been so much better if the script had gone at least one more rewrite. Well, actually no, there was one thing about this movie that I didn't like. The dragon character, Sisu herself. This is where I really wish they'd given the script another rewrite because they decided to make Sisu the comedic relief character. And they do it by making her an idiot. She says and does a lot of really stupid things, and her jokes are just plain dumb. I'm guessing they were doing this to make the kids laugh, but I was in a theater that was packed. It was filled with parents who were bringing their kids to come and see this. Not even the kids were laughing. And you know, while we're on the subject, have you stopped to think that having comedic relief characters in general is absolutely pointless? If you want your story to have comedy, that's fine. But here's an idea. Why not have it so the comedy comes from the characters working off each other? Either that, or actually try to make the character legitimately funny. Cramming all of the comedy into one character, and making that character an idiot is just plain lazy writing. Okay, now brief rant aside, what do I think of the movie overall? I do admire it for its ambition. It's a CGI Disney animated movie that's trying to be more for adults. There's more of an emphasis on action. There are no songs. It's trying to be philosophical with how it sends its messages. And speaking of which, I actually do like the message of this movie. The central theme and message of this movie is about trust. Raya is strong, but she has trust issues because of what happened to her in the past. While Sisu is too trusting and just winds up being naive. So it can actually be a beautiful thing when you find the right amount of trust. And when that trust gets betrayed, everyone suffers for it. That's a good message. And despite all the movie's flaws, it still manages to send it in a clear and respectable way. I also think it's a very poignant message for today, especially in this age where everything seems so divided. But that's a completely different topic. So despite all of this movie's problems, I'm going to be nice to it and give it a 7 out of 10. It's an ambitious movie that could have been made into something truly special if it had just spent a little more time in the oven. Still though, I did have a good time in the theater, even if the ride did have plenty of bumpy moments. Still better than Frozen 2 though.